I do not regret. She says it quietly, almost like an afterthought, but the force of those 4 words hits me like a shot to the spine. The first time I hear them, I'm standing by our bedroom door, transfixed by a new photo she's posted online. She's wearing a satin lingerie set I've never seen before, leaning against a dresser in the small guest bedroom, Walter's guest bedroom. I feel a sharp spike of heat cut through my body, as if an invisible wire is scraping along my chest. I can't decide if it's anger, heartbreak, or something else that stings in my lungs and roils in my stomach. Yet I say nothing. Instead, I stare at the phone, at her figure, at the careless tilt of her head. The rest of the room behind her is unfamiliar and sterile, like a hotel suite. In the reflection of the tall mirror, I notice only a glimpse of him, Walter, a shape near the corner, barely visible, but enough to make my scalp prickle. She has done this quite openly, almost brazenly, but the strangest part is the small tagline: "A new day deserves new beginnings." I stand there, reading and rereading those words, as if they could tell me something else. I hear her in the hallway a moment later, rummaging in the closet. My entire chest constricts, and I clench my fists, struggling not to tremble. She walks in, sees me with the phone. She doesn't even flinch, just sets down a stack of folded laundry on the bed. I wait for her to offer some defense or explanation, but she simply sits on the mattress, rubs lotion into her hands, then repeats in an even voice, "I do not regret." I realize she's referring to that photograph, to that night, to all the nights I've suspected and tried to pretend never happened. She doesn't regret any of it. I open my mouth to respond, but all the words die on my tongue. My chest is pounding. I can't speak. She leaves me there, in that stunned silence. The doorknob rattles lightly as she pulls it shut behind her, and I'm aware of my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. Even though my body remains upright, a deep physical ache roots itself in my stomach and creeps down my arms, filling me with the sense I am collapsing from the inside. It's a tangible, pulsing pain, as if something is literally pressing against my ribs. I used to think heartbreak was just an expression. Now it feels more like an internal bruising that demands I stand still and absorb the blow. I blink, and my vision skates across the room. The smell of her perfume lingers, the one she once wore only for me. There's a framed photo on the dresser. Our wedding day, years ago. She's holding flowers. We're both smiling. I feel a sudden wave of nausea. My hand involuntarily touches my brow, the little scar near my left eyebrow throbbing as if it's fresh. All at once, that memory tears open the present like a crowbar, letting everything spill into my mind at once. I was 22 when that scar happened. Biking across a wet street in Buffalo, I skidded, crashed, and ended up with stitches. My father teased me later, said it added character. That same father died 5 years later, leaving me with a sense of unfinished conversations that will never be resolved. Maybe that's why I valued stability so much. Maybe that's why I tried so hard to build a life with Lauren that didn't crack. But it's cracked now. And as I stand in the bedroom, that throbbing near my brow is a reminder of how easily life can draw blood. That night, I recall the hollow sound of the front door closing after she walked out. She said nothing else. She just left me with that phrase, "I do not regret," echoing in my head. Eventually, I shuffle downstairs to make coffee. My body feels stiff. There's a physical tension in my muscles, in my arms, as if I've been beaten. I open a cabinet and see a single mug, realize all the other dishes are in the dishwasher. The windows outside reflect darkness, only a few streetlights flickering. I wonder if she's with Walter right now, or if she's simply driving around, clearing her head. I spend the rest of that evening in a haze, replaying the small details I missed. How many times have I noticed her phone lighting up at night, only for her to flip it over? How many evenings did she come home with a faint new perfume on her skin, claiming she tried a tester at some store? "You're too suspicious," she once said with a careless laugh. I just wanted to smell something different. It was always that intangible shift, so subtle I couldn't name it. Yet it thrived in the spaces between us. She was drifting. I must have known. If I had tried to stop it, would it have mattered? The first time I came close to real proof was when I found that check in her coat pocket, printed neatly across the memo line. Thanks for the night with me. A swirl of a signature that could have been scribbled by anyone. The sight of those words put my heart in a vice. I remember swallowing back a sour taste in my mouth, trying to fight the tremor in my hands. But it was the quiet that followed that was worse. The quiet realization that we were truly finished, that love had morphed into something unrecognizable. I tucked the check back into her pocket. Part of me wanted to throw it in her face, scream at her, but I did nothing. It was my choice to remain silent. Maybe that was the first step toward my own destruction. Days later, Lauren left for a weekend conference. She returned with no souvenirs, no brochures, no mention of what she had learned. She glanced at me once with weary eyes, gave me a half smile, then disappeared into the bathroom. When she came out, I said nothing about the check, though it rattled around in my mind constantly. My lips stayed pressed shut. I only asked, "You hungry?" She sighed, said she grabbed something on the road. If she noticed how I looked at her, if she saw the question in my eyes, she gave no indication. I realized then how far we'd drifted. It wasn't just the affair. It was the emptiness that had seeped into our marriage a long time ago. A hollow quiet that replaced any real conversation. No fights, no tears, just a growing distance that neither of us confronted. She lost herself in social media posts, in planning parties we never had. I vanished into my spreadsheets, my routines, my attempts at normalcy. One day I looked at her across the dinner table and saw someone I barely recognized. Maybe she felt the same. Then Walter Green entered her life more intimately, and I suppose that was that. A few weeks after I discovered the check, I found a text message on her phone. She was in the shower, and her phone buzzed on the counter. The message preview displayed his name, Walter. A fleeting sense of dread made me pick it up. She rarely set a lock code, so the phone opened. "It's your night," the message read. "Red or black. I want to see you in that one again." The rest of the conversation I can't bring myself to recall in detail. Lines about how she felt in his arms, how she missed him. In that moment, a wave of energy surged through me, as if my skin was on fire, but my heart turned to ice. I put the phone back, face down, exactly where it was. That kind of revelation leaves a brand on your psyche. I still feel it. I didn't confront her right away. I tried to gather myself, breathe, think. But eventually, I crumbled. It was late at night when I approached her in the living room. The lights were low. A sitcom flickered on the TV. She was scrolling on her laptop, probably reading about social media trends for work. I stood there, hands balled into fists at my sides, and simply said, "We need to talk." She paused, locked the laptop, and set it aside. There wasn't much confusion in her eyes, no alarm, just a flat acceptance. The same look one might give a neighbor who asks to borrow sugar for the 5th time. "All right," she replied. "Talk." I tried to force the words out. I wanted to accuse her, to demand the truth, but something lodged in my throat. My heart hammered so hard I was certain she could hear it. Finally, I managed to say, "I know about Walter." She didn't blink. "And?" she asked. I recall that single word as if it were a punch to my chest. "And?" As though it were a trivial detail, a mild inconvenience we might address casually. She seemed bored, or maybe resigned to a conversation she'd rehearsed in her head. "How long?" I asked. She shrugged. "Long enough." My mouth felt dry. "Are you in love with him?" She stared at me, then let out a slight exhale. "I don't think that's the right word. But he gives me something I need." She said it calmly, not a hint of remorse. "I tried to tell you. You never listened." I wanted to yell, to cry, to do anything but stand there in stunned silence. But the words refused to materialize. My body betrayed me with a surge of dull pain that radiated from my neck down my spine, like a clamp tightening around each vertebra. She rose from the couch and left the room without waiting for a reply. And that was it. No fight, no dramatic meltdown. Just emptiness. I still remember the first time I actually saw them together. A few nights after that conversation, I drove to the office late. I had some half-formed idea about confronting Walter in his own territory. Maybe I wanted to catch them. Maybe I wanted to see if she would lie to me again. My rational mind scolded me for doing something foolish, but a knot in my gut pressed me forward. I parked outside the building after hours. Most lights were off, but a few offices were still illuminated by the glow of computer screens. And there, in the glow of Walter's corner office, I saw them. She was standing against the edge of a desk. He was close behind, hands on her hips. Her blouse hung partly open. I could see the smooth line of her shoulder, the silhouette of her bra strap sliding down her arm. Even from across the parking lot, I could sense the heat in the room. Walter's head bent low, his mouth near her neck, and she arched back with eyes half shut. They were talking in low voices, but I couldn't hear the words. The sight alone was enough to sear into my memory. I felt a twisting sensation in my chest, not just emotional but physical, as though the tendons in my rib cage were being wrenched in opposite directions. My throat tightened, and I realized I wasn't breathing. Yet I stood there. I didn't honk the horn, or charge inside like some avenging angel. I felt stuck to the ground, pinned by the horror of a reality I wanted to deny. At some point, the light in Walter's office went out, and I was left staring at my own warped reflection in the dark glass. I almost felt relieved that I couldn't see them anymore. Driving home that night, I barely felt my own hands on the steering wheel. An ache had spread between my shoulder blades and down through my arms. I thought about the phone message, the check, the pictures of them. My mind churned in circles, fumbling for a direction. By the time I arrived in the driveway, my entire back felt like one large bruise, throbbing in time with my heartbeat. I couldn't muster the energy to go inside. Instead, I sat with the car radio turned off, just listening to the quiet. Eventually, I stepped out. Buddy, our Labrador, greeted me at the door with a wagging tail. He whimpered softly as though sensing my turmoil. Lauren was nowhere in sight. Maybe gone to Walter's again, or maybe just out for a drive. I sank onto the couch, while Buddy curled up near my feet, offering silent companionship. That was the only comfort I had that night. Flashbacks come in waves now. I remember the day I married Lauren. She wore a simple white dress, hair pinned up, eyes shining with love, or what I thought was love. We had big plans then, a life full of stability, maybe kids, maybe a future built on shared dreams. I wanted so badly to be that kind of husband who provided, who protected. My father's death had taught me how quickly life can collapse. If you're not careful, everything you cherish evaporates. That's how I got here, I suppose. I was always methodical, always trying to anticipate storms. Yet the storm raged inside our home, silent but relentless. Perhaps Walter's presence only gave shape to the emptiness that was already there. I'm not sure when I decided to look for revenge, or if I decided at all. It was more a slow burn, fueled by pain. The moment that truly ignited it might have been when the DNA test arrived in the mail. I'd been suspicious for months that Lauren might be pregnant at some point or that something else was hidden. But the results were strange, revealing that neither I nor Walter could have been a father to any hypothetical child of Lauren's. In the end, that detail was overshadowed by the raw betrayal itself. She was surprised by the test. I wasn't. A final blow to any illusions I had left. I recall rummaging through the old chest in our attic, searching for something, anything, that might give me a sense of purpose. I found an album of family photos, including pictures of me and my father fishing by a lake in Buffalo. Looking at my younger self, I felt a dull, throbbing pang in my body. It was not just emotional heartbreak, but a literal physical ache that crept into my bones. I closed the album, and blinked hard against the tears threatening to escape. Emotions had become so wrapped in physical sensations that my hands shook. In the gloom of the attic, I resolved that I would no longer let them walk all over me. I couldn't force Lauren to love me again, and I no longer wanted to. But maybe I could make them feel some fraction of the pain they'd inflicted. Walter Green, older colleague, senior advisor. He had that polished persona, the crisp suits, the neat salt and pepper beard. We'd once exchanged polite nods in the hallway, nothing more. Little did I know he was sliding into my life in ways I never imagined. I remember once hearing from a coworker that Walter was divorced, with 2 daughters in college. So maybe he was lonely. Maybe that was his excuse. But a moral boundary still existed, until he decided it didn't. My vengeance wasn't going to be loud. Not a confrontation, not a fight. In the stillness of my frustration, I found an outlet. Finances, that's my domain. Walter relies on certain deals, certain accounts, a hush agreement here or there, minor adjustments that could cause major ripples. I knew enough about the firm to see how a single suspicious transaction could place him under investigation. It was a vile plan, one I never dreamed I was capable of. And yet each time that dull ache flared in my body, I felt more convinced that his betrayal deserved retribution. For weeks, I quietly studied the internal system. I manipulated some figures, carefully leaving no direct fingerprints. I knew exactly which colleague was gullible enough to sign off on changes if I dressed them in the right corporate jargon. I left subtle trails leading back to Walter. I told myself it was justice, or at least equilibrium. If I had to endure heartbreak every night, he could endure the cost of wrongdoing. My own reflection in the mirror started to look strange to me. My eyes, ringed with exhaustion, stared back as if accusing me of hypocrisy. But I pushed that thought away. During that period of uneasy scheming, Lauren barely spoke to me. We shared the same house, yet existed in different worlds. She was often out, or in bed early, or scrolling on her phone in another room. When we did cross paths, it was tension incarnate. I'd reach for a coffee mug, and she'd be there. She'd glance at me, maybe purse her lips, then walk away. The memory of her repeated phrase, "I do not regret," reverberated in my skull. One evening, I found her in the kitchen, idly flipping through a magazine. Buddy lay at her feet, tail swishing. Without looking up, she said, "Are we going to keep pretending?" She sounded indifferent, even bored. "What is there to pretend?" I asked. She closed the magazine. "I'm seeing him," she said, as if it were a status update on the weather. "I stay at his place sometimes." I nodded, feeling that twist of pain in my gut. My throat felt raw, as though I'd swallowed shards of ice. "All right," I answered, because what else could I say? She sighed, then picked up Buddy's leash. "He needs a walk," she said, and went outside, leaving me alone again. For a moment, I stared at her half-eaten sandwich on the counter, wanting to hurl it against the wall. Instead, I inhaled, the stale kitchen air thick in my lungs, and told myself, soon, Walter will learn the cost of taking what was mine. It was a bleak thought, but at least it gave me a direction. In the days that followed, I was meticulous in my efforts. A single line in the system, a shift in an account that made sense on the surface yet created complications, once the chain of approvals reached Walter's desk. The tension in my neck and shoulders grew into an almost constant ache. I'd lie in bed at night, staring at the dark ceiling, feeling the weight of my own revenge coiling in my belly. I wasn't proud, but each time I considered backing out, I pictured them together. I remembered the photo of her in the lingerie, the text messages, the check that read, "Thanks for the night with me." That sense of creeping betrayal fueled me onward. And then came the day everything toppled. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the compliance department erupted in quiet chaos. Allegations of manipulated numbers had surfaced. An internal review singled out suspicious codes that tracked back to Walter's ID. I overheard hushed conversations, saw the drawn faces of upper management. The tension at the office was like a suffocating blanket. Walter's name came up repeatedly. Eventually, he was escorted to a conference room for questioning. I sat at my cubicle, ignoring the painful hammering in my back, ignoring the sweat gathering on my brow, ignoring the image of my father's disappointed face in my mind. I just typed away at my keyboard, feigning focus on a dull spreadsheet. I left work early that day. Couldn't stand the pressure. Outside, the Dallas sun glared. My car felt like an oven. Driving home, my hands clenched the wheel so tightly I could feel a slight tremor. My entire torso pulsed with a deep internal bruise. I told myself it was done. Walter would be suspended, maybe even fired, possibly face legal ramifications. In my twisted perspective, that meant I had reclaimed some shred of dignity. Yet inside, I felt no relief, only a hollow pang that made my breath hitch in my throat. Later that evening, I stood in the driveway, engine off, seatbelt still fastened. I stared at the house. Lauren's car was there, Buddy probably waiting inside. The thought of stepping in filled me with dread. I didn't even know if I should call out to her or keep silent. I forced myself to go in, my heart pounding like a drum. I found her in the living room. She was standing by the window, arms crossed, staring into the dusky twilight. She must have heard me come in, but she didn't turn around. The quiet pressed on my eardrums. Finally, I spoke. "Lauren," I said, voice tight. "Where's Buddy?" She shrugged. "He's in the yard, I think." I nodded, glancing around. The walls seemed to be closing in. A lamp on the side table cast a dull glow, turning the room into a place of thick shadows. I cleared my throat. "You all right?" I asked. She inhaled through her nose, then let it out slowly. "Walter called," she said at last, her voice clipped. "He's being accused of tampering with accounts. He thinks it's a setup." My stomach twisted. My chest burned with tension. "I see," I managed. She turned to face me. Her eyes held an intensity I hadn't seen before. "You know what's strange?" she asked. "He said someone had to have known precisely where to place those entries, how to route them back to him." She stared at me, not blinking. "He thinks you did it." I said nothing. I only felt my spine grinding under an invisible weight. My silence seemed to confirm her suspicions. She gave a bitter laugh, though it had no real humor in it. "So this is what it's come to," she said. "Retaliation. Punishing him. Punishing me." I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. Eventually, I rasped. "He took everything from me. I had toe." She snapped her gaze away, swallowing hard. "You still don't get it, do you? Everything was already gone before he came along." Her tone was low, nearly a whisper, but it reverberated like a shout in my head. "We lost each other years ago." I felt something twist in my gut. "So you blame me?" She shook her head. "I'm tired of blame." Then she stepped closer, so close I could see the faint crow's feet at the corners of her eyes. "I do not regret him," she repeated. "But I also don't regret us. In a weird way, both things made me who I am, and I can't apologize for that." A coldness spread through my chest, as though ice water had replaced my bloodstream. The physical ache in my body flared with new intensity. I closed my eyes, inhaled, and let the moment pass without any words. She went upstairs. I stood there until the lamp's glow felt suffocating. Finally, I moved to the back door, let Buddy in from the yard, and stroked his head absent-mindedly. The dog whined quietly, sensing my turmoil. Eventually, I flicked off the light and sank onto the sofa, my back protesting with a deep pang. The next morning, I woke early to the sound of her packing the suitcase. She left quietly, offering me only a sidelong look. I didn't ask where she was going. I assumed to Walter's place or a hotel, waiting out the storm. My entire body felt like a lead weight, limbs stiff as I got out of bed. Yet there was a strange calm within me, an acceptance of sorts, though it came paired with a hollow sense of dread. I was about to head to work when a knock on the door startled me. Opening it, I saw Walter. My heart lurched painfully. He was disheveled, eyes bloodshot, tie undone around his neck. The slump of his posture betrayed deep fatigue. If I were a better man, I might have felt pity. But all I felt was that throbbing anger coursing through my veins. He stared at me. "I need to talk to Lauren," he said. I gripped the door, forcing a steadiness into my voice. "She's not here." He nodded, gaze sweeping over the living room behind me. Then he stepped forward, and I backed up. He entered, ignoring my silent protest. Buddy barked once from the corner. Walter ran a hand over his face. "I've been suspended," he said in a dull monotone. "They're investigating every file I touched, and they think I—" He paused, swallowing. "It's big trouble for me. Possibly legal." I just stared. He searched my expression, perhaps hoping for some sign of mercy or reassurance. He found none. "She's told me you engineered it," he added, voice shaking with tension. "But I'm asking you, why? Why do this?" A dark satisfaction flared in me, but it was mixed with shame. I tried not to let either emotion show on my face. The physical pain in my back twisted, sharper than before. I took a breath, exhaled. "Walter," I began quietly, "you knew exactly what you were doing when you started sleeping with my wife." He scowled. Then his features sagged. "I didn't think it would become. Look, she was lonely. I was lonely. I never meant." I raised a hand to cut him off. "Don't justify it. You broke a boundary. And now you're paying." His jaw set, a flicker of anger replacing the desperation. "You didn't fix anything," he said, voice low. "You only destroyed what was left. Does that give you peace?" A wave of nausea rolled through me. I felt the adrenaline surge in my chest, colliding with the ache that had taken up permanent residence there. "You want to talk about destruction," I hissed, though I kept my voice controlled. "You walked into my life. You took—" I paused, breath faltering. "You took everything." Buddy whined again. And for a moment, Walter's gaze shifted to the dog, then back to me. He shook his head as if trying to dispel a lingering thought. "Maybe I did," he admitted. "But you had a chance to fight for her, to fix your marriage, and you didn't. You let it die." He took a step back. "I'm not saying I'm innocent. But you, this little revenge." He let out a soft, bitter laugh. "I hope it was worth it." With that, he turned and strode out the door, leaving it wide open behind him. I stood there, body trembling with both fury and profound exhaustion. The sun poured in, bright and harsh, illuminating the dust motes that drifted through the living room. My chest felt crushed. There was no victory in my bones, no sense of triumph. I didn't go to work after that. I felt too drained, too unhinged. Instead, I found myself drawn to the mirror in our bedroom, the one where Lauren had once stood, adjusting her hair and smiling at her reflection. I stared at my own face. Tired eyes, lines of tension around my mouth. My head throbbed with a dull pressure. I lifted my hand to trace the scar near my eyebrow, recalling that old accident. Deep down, I knew Walter was right. I had hammered the final nail into the coffin of my marriage, maybe my own sense of dignity as well. In that reflection, I saw not just a betrayed husband, but a man who had stooped to sabotage. I whispered to the empty room, "What have I done?" The answer was silence. My legs felt weak, my torso ached. I grabbed a shirt from the closet, stuffed some essentials into a duffel bag, and decided I needed to get out of that house for a while. Buddy followed me, tail wagging uncertainly. I knelt down, placed a hand on his head. "I'll be back," I told him, not entirely sure if it was true. Then I rose and walked out. The next hours blurred. I drove aimlessly through Dallas, eventually ending up on a quiet road leading to a small lake outside the city. It reminded me of the lake I used to visit as a boy with my father. I parked in a gravel lot, the crisp smell of water drifting through the open window. The memory of fishing lines, of my father's warm chuckle, flickered in my mind. My chest constricted again, that dull, throbbing pain intensifying. I stepped out of the car, walked down a short embankment to the water's edge. The air felt cool against my skin. I lowered myself onto an old wooden bench. The boards creaked beneath my weight. The horizon was gray, like it might storm soon. For a long time, I just stared at the ripples on the water, letting the tension in my body settle. Something about the gentle lapping against the shore lulled me, reminded me that life moves on. But the ache was still there. Flashbacks ran rampant in my mind. Lauren's indifferent gaze, Walter's accusatory glare, my father's memory, the day I earned my finance degree, the small table where we once sat as a couple, sharing hopes for the future. All those images churned together, leaving me with a hollowness I had no idea how to fill. Eventually, I glanced at my phone. I had no new messages. A part of me wondered if Lauren was already with Walter, comforting him, or if she was angry with him, or with me, or with the entire situation. I realized I no longer had the energy to unravel that. The only certainty was that everything was shattered, including me. I lost track of time on that bench. The sky grew darker. A few drops of rain fell. At some point, I bowed my head, my elbows resting on my knees, and felt something close to tears pressed behind my eyes. But none came. Instead, an odd numbness washed over me. I let out a long, shuddering breath, trying to ease the stabbing pain in my shoulders. It was dark by the time I returned to the house. The driveway was empty. Lauren's car still gone. I assumed she'd left for good. Inside, the lights were off. I flicked a switch, illuminating the living room, and felt a wave of emptiness at the sight of the sofa, the table, the pictures on the wall. This was the place we once called our home. Now it felt abandoned, like a half-forgotten stage set. I walked to the kitchen, rummaged for something to eat, though I had no appetite. A headache pulsed at my temples. Then I noticed an envelope on the table, my name scrawled on it. I recognized Lauren's handwriting. A tightness formed in my chest, some mixture of dread and curiosity. I opened it and found a single folded sheet of paper. The message was brief. You asked me once if I loved him. I don't know if I can answer, but I know I can't stay here anymore. I hope you find whatever peace you're searching for. No apology, no condemnation, just another void. I crumpled the note in my palm, exhaling slowly. My gaze fell on the wedding photo across the room, faintly visible in the shadows. The two smiling faces captured there now felt like strangers. A jolt of sadness squeezed my heart, and a new wave of that bruising ache rippled across my chest. But I couldn't blame only her. My revenge had taken me down a path I could scarcely believe. Now I was alone with the consequences. In the silence, the only sound was the soft click of Buddy's nails on the floor as he approached. He gazed up at me, tail wagging uncertainly. I forced a small, bitter smile and patted his head. My vision blurred for a second. I placed the crumpled note on the counter and turned away. I didn't sleep much that night. My body felt battered. Each shift in position triggered another jolt of pain in my spine, as though my muscles refused to relax. Dawn arrived with a pale glow through the curtains, and I dragged myself out of bed, planning to take Buddy for a walk before anything else. The leash was where Lauren had left it. I picked it up, gave Buddy a gentle pat, and opened the door. The crisp morning air hit my lungs like a jolt of clarity. We stepped outside, the hush of dawn giving the neighborhood a muted stillness. I walked slowly, each step sending a slight twinge through my lower back. Buddy sniffed at the grass, oblivious to my tension. My thoughts drifted to the final scene of the story that had played out between me, Lauren, and Walter. I'd achieved my revenge, such as it was, but at what cost? I pictured Walter's weary face. I pictured Lauren's distant eyes. And I pictured my own reflection in that mirror, the haunted look that told me I was no longer the man I used to be. About 3 houses down, But he stopped, pawing at the sidewalk. I tugged gently, and he moved along. A neighbor's porch light clicked off. Somewhere a car engine started. The world was stirring to life, while I felt stuck in a twilight zone, uncertain of my next move. The promise of any new beginning seemed faint, overshadowed by the crushing aftermath of betrayal and retribution. Returning to the house, I noticed the mail carrier passing. He handed me a small bundle of letters and a large envelope. I caught sight of some official seal, recognized it as another piece of financial documentation from the bank. Possibly a new statement or an official notice about the investigation swirling around Walter. My chest tightened. The old me would have eagerly opened it, wanting to keep my finances in perfect order. Instead, I tossed it on the table. The weight of everything felt too heavy. By mid-morning, I realized I couldn't hide in that house forever. I showered, dressed in a pressed collared shirt and slacks almost by habit, and got in the car. The mindlessness of the commute offered a strange comfort. I parked in my usual spot at the firm. The front lobby was busy. People moved with brisk efficiency, phones to ears, documents in hand. I nodded to a coworker who greeted me with subdued courtesy. The tension in the building was palpable. Everyone had heard about the fiasco with Walter. Rumors circulated. Eyes flickered toward me with curiosity or suspicion. I set my jaw and made my way to my desk. My computer chimed with unread emails, meeting invites, memos. I forced myself to focus. Each keystroke was accompanied by a dull throbbing in my shoulders, as if my body refused to let go of the pain. Hours blurred. Sometime in the afternoon, the manager called me into his office. A swirl of dread pooled in my stomach, but I stood and followed. He wore a grave expression. "There's an ongoing review," he said, lacing his fingers on the desk. "Walter's situation is complicated. We're investigating who else might be involved." My pulse quickened. "I understand." He regarded me with caution. "I need to ask if you knew anything about irregularities in the accounts. Walter claims he was framed." I steadied my breathing. "I wouldn't have knowledge of that," I said, keeping my face neutral. He nodded slowly, though a flicker of doubt remained in his eyes. "We'll be conducting interviews. If there's anything you know, it would be best to come forward now." My heart hammered. I swallowed the dryness in my throat. "I understand," I repeated, giving nothing more. He sighed. "Go back to work. We'll speak again." Exiting that office, I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. The cost of my revenge was rising. I returned to my desk, ignoring the tightness in my neck. The day crawled forward, each minute a slow drip of tension. I could almost hear the faint ticking of my old watch, the one from my father, marking the passing seconds of a life I barely recognized. When the clock finally hit quitting time, I packed up and left the building, feeling eyes on me as I walked out. The air outside was thick with humidity and the promise of a storm. I made my way to the car, shoulders slumped, body fatigued. As I turned the key, a text notification popped up on my phone. It was from Lauren. A short message. "I'm picking up the rest of my stuff tomorrow. Don't be there." A wave of unsteady emotion collided with the backache that had plagued me all day. I closed my eyes, pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, and let out a single ragged breath. She was really gone. Walter's fate was sealed, or soon would be. And I was left. What? Vindicated? Hardly. The hollow ache lingered, as if to remind me that I had chosen a path of silent ruin instead of confrontation and honesty. I turned on the ignition, pulling out of the parking lot as thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm hit halfway home, heavy raindrops slamming against the windshield. Traffic slowed to a crawl. My wipers worked furiously, but visibility was terrible. I gripped the steering wheel, tension collecting in my arms, the dull ache in my spine intensifying. Headlights flashed, horns honked. For a moment, I considered pulling over to let the storm pass. Then I thought, why bother? Let it crash down on me. Let it all come undone. Lightning forked across the sky, revealing the outlines of halted cars in front of me. My breath felt thin. My mind swirled with images. Lauren in lingerie, Walter's helpless face, the day we said our vows, the father I never got to say goodbye to properly. The primal ache in my body spiked, and I forced myself to keep breathing, keep the car moving, keep everything from fracturing further. Finally, the storm tapered off. The flow of traffic loosened. I made it home, drenched in sweat, more exhausted than I'd ever felt. Inside, the house was dark and quiet. No trace of Lauren. I braced myself on the edge of the kitchen counter, letting the quiet wash over me. Then I noticed a single text from Walter. It simply read, "You got what you wanted. I hope you can live with it." I turned off my phone, heart pounding. Buddy ambled over, and I knelt to pat him. In that quiet moment, I realized there would be no tidy resolution here, no triumphant sense of right and wrong. Only the aftermath of choices. Hers, Walter's, mine. A slow pulse of pain filled my chest, the physical manifestation of every regret. My breathing sounded harsh in the silence. That night, I dreamed of Buffalo's winters, fishing with my father on a frozen lake. In the dream, the ice cracked beneath us, and I tumbled into dark water, gasping for air, while he stood on the shore, distant and unreachable. I woke with a jolt, chest tight, sweat cold on my skin. The digital clock read 3 a.m. Thunder rolled softly outside, the last echoes of the storm. I stared at the ceiling, letting the remnants of the nightmare fade. My body felt like dead weight. I thought about calling my mother, or my sisters, or some friend I'd long neglected. But I didn't know what to say. I've destroyed my marriage and framed my wife's lover. How are you? Instead, I lay there in the darkness, letting the silent room press down on my ears, waiting for sleep to return. It didn't. When the morning light finally crept through the blinds, I got up, showered, tried to gather myself. A sense of finality settled over me like a heavy blanket. I understood that everything had reached its end. The check with "thanks for the night with me," the photo in that lingerie, the stolen office rendezvous, all of it had led to the dissolution we now faced. My revenge had blossomed into a poison that consumed us all. And what was left? I dressed in simple jeans and a t-shirt, ignoring the iron slacks in the closet. Lauren's message from the previous day rang in my head. She was coming for her things. "Don't be there," she'd said. So I obeyed. I grabbed my keys and left, Buddy trailing at my side. Maybe it was better that way. No final confrontation, no forced goodbyes. Just a silent admission that the life we had was over. I took Buddy to a nearby park, letting him roam. My back and shoulders ached constantly, as if those muscles had seized into permanent knots. I let him sniff at bushes and chase a squirrel or two. My phone remained in my pocket, silent. I didn't want to check it. The sky was hazy, and a mild breeze whispered through the trees. Sitting on a bench, I watched the passers-by. Joggers, a man tossing a frisbee with his dog, an older couple out for a stroll. Their normalcy felt distant, like a memory from a different life. I massaged the back of my neck, trying to ease the tension, but it stubbornly refused to dissipate. Eventually, I exhaled, gathered Buddy's leash, and walked back toward the car. If Lauren was collecting her possessions now, then by the time I returned, the house would be truly mine. And empty. As I drove, the sting of fresh tears prickled my eyes. But none fell. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles pale. The final act was done. I'd inflicted pain on Walter, severed my bond with Lauren, and exiled myself to a solitude of my own making. If it was a victory, it felt hollow. If it was justice, it felt cold. Approaching my street, I slowed. There was no sign of her car. I parked in the driveway, stepping out into the quiet afternoon. Buddy hopped down, sniffing at the grass. I hesitated at the front door, half expecting to hear movement inside, to see boxes or disarray. But when I opened it, all I saw was a few random open spaces on shelves where Lauren's belongings once stood, some missing clothes from the closet, her favorite paintings gone from the walls. A hush enveloped me. On the kitchen table, I found my house key, neatly placed next to the folded note from the previous night, as if that sealed the matter. I stood there, letting the moment sink in. A faint wave of relief coursed through me, but it was overshadowed by grief. "She's gone," I said aloud, my voice hoarse. Buddy looked up at me, tail wagging uncertainly. I offered him a shaky smile, rubbing his ears. "We'll be all right," I murmured, hardly believing it myself. Then came the final blow. In the silence, my phone buzzed. I fished it out of my pocket. An unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. A curt voice introduced themselves as a compliance officer from the firm. They wanted me to come in for a second interview. Additional questions. My lungs constricted. I gave them a polite acknowledgement and ended the call. The ramifications of my sabotage were still unfolding. My short, cold act of vengeance might lead to serious repercussions for me if they discovered the truth. The dryness in my mouth returned, and a fresh ache seized my core. I set the phone on the counter, exhaling shakily. My heart pounded in my ears. Outside, the sun drifted behind a cloud, dimming the light through the window. The quiet pressed in from all sides, as though the house itself held its breath. Everything felt surreal. Empty walls, the lingering smell of her perfume, the dog's soft panting at my feet, the final knowledge that I alone must face the fallout. My body tensed again, the dull pain swelling in my back and chest. I walked to the mirror in the foyer, staring at myself for a long time. I saw a man who had lost everything. A man who had inflicted suffering to ease his own. A man whose regrets now outweighed the illusions he once held. My reflection blurred slightly, and for an instant, I thought of my father, of Buffalo, of all the moments that shaped me into who I am. And I wondered if, given the chance, I would do it all differently. My phone chimed again. Another message, maybe from the firm, maybe from Lauren, maybe from Walter, who knew. But I didn't check it. Instead, I stepped away from the mirror, feeling that relentless ache in my bones, and walked toward the door with Buddy by my side, leaving the phone on the table and the echo of our ruined life behind. The last I felt was the slow thud of my heart, each beat accompanied by the hollow understanding that revenge had claimed its price, and I had nothing left to bargain with. I turned the knob and stepped out into the muted light, letting the door swing shut behind me. The final lock clicked with a dull, definitive sound.